Board of County Commissioners is now back in session.
Ready?
Ready.
All right, while we're waiting on that, Mr. Chairman.
Steve is here.
Put the date next to your name, 9/5/17. We'll take care of the rest of it. Yes, sir.
All right, Mike, where are we at? Alan Pierce, Restore Coordinator Report.
Okay, good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. The report is on your iPad. There's a number of attachments that aren't really too critical to my report, but they're associated with my report. First item, inform the board that I attended a Triumph Board workshop in Destin at the request of the chairman. The workshop was for the purpose of the Triumph Board to discuss the application process they will use. As the board began to get into details regarding the type of economic assessments they wanted as part of the application, I spoke briefly at the meeting about Franklin County's limited staff and our difficulty in developing economic data on our own. At the end of the meeting, there was a discussion by some of the Triumph Board that perhaps they should set aside some funds for the smaller counties to hire professionals to assist in the application process. The Triumph Board will meet again in September, and I expect it will be the October meeting before they finalize the application process. I do agree with the chairman that it's going to be a good idea for Franklin County to attend as many Triumph meetings as possible. This is my analogy. There are 8 counties to which Triumph funds are directed. That is analogous to 8 students in a class. If the Triumph Board is seen as the instructor and there are only 8 students in the class, it is pretty obvious when one of the students does not show up. Now, mind you, there are plenty of consultants and lobbyists at the meetings, but it's the counties to which the money is directed. So I'm going to, try to do what I can to assist you all in going to these meetings, but like I'll be out of the county in October. I don't know how frequently they'll meet once they finish the application process. They were meeting every month for a while, but once that application process is finished, then they may not meet for a bit because they don't have anything to talk about, or not a whole lot to talk about until the applications come in, which could easily be 90 days later. So it's a little uncertain, but that's my assessment. The only action out of this, I ask you that you reimburse me for my travel to the Destin meeting, but other than that, I'll defer to the chairman or anybody else if you want to ask me questions about Triumph.
I'll make a motion to reimburse you for your travel in Destin.
So, well, motion on the floor by Commissioner Sanders, second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion? I do think we need to reimburse Alan's travel. I asked him to go to that meeting. As you remember, I received the ability to travel at the direction of the board at one of the earlier Triumph meetings, and subsequently I spoke at the meeting also, speaking and basically told all of them that, we're a smaller county, we have limited resources, and that we were going to need extra time to develop projects and submit them for funding. And that's where Alan came in. He spoke about the same thing at the Triumph meeting that he went to, the workshop that he went to, which establishing the guidelines for the application process. And that's where, and I've received calls on this funding mechanism to help us hire a consultant or somebody that can work on this every day instead of just a couple hours a week. We'll have somebody in here that can work on these projects every day on behalf of the county, and they'll be selected by this county, and we'll go out for RFPs. But I did receive a call from our representative on the Triumph Board suggesting this. I've talked to Senator Montford on this idea. He was for it. Hosby Shears was for it. So I looked at the next Triumph meeting at them setting aside some money for the smaller counties such as Gulf, Franklin, and Wakulla, as we have limited resources and limited ability to put these projects together in a timely fashion. So I do think that's going to happen, and I think we need to move forward with that.
One thing, let me tell you how far behind, how difficult this Triumph Board's position is. They're newly created as a Triumph Board. They've only been meeting for less than a year. They don't even have a staff. So they're talking about, okay, we finished this application process, then who's going to review it? So they've got to get somebody on their side of the equation to review these applications. So I mean, both sides are trying to figure out, what they're going to ask for and who's going to review it. So it's going to, I suspect, and I say this without knowing at all, but I suspect once they approve an application process, then the Triumph Board's going to have to hire, their own analysts on their side. They'll have to give the counties, 90 days to submit things. I mean, I just see it's going to be a little bit of time for everybody to get their act together.
It's going to be a little bit cumbersome now, and also in the meeting that I attended, sustainability is a big issue.
Yes.
The school board and the 2 municipalities are eligible to submit projects. Those projects will come to the county commission, either for a letter of support or a letter of opposition. That does not tie the hands of the Triumph Board as to whether they fund those projects or not. But they gotta come to this county commission and ask for a letter of support, and if the county does not support that project, then you would issue a letter of opposition, and then it's up to the Triumph Board to decide whether they wanna fund that or not. I will tell you that the county's letter of support is very advantageous for the applicant. If the county board is opposed to these projects, then it's a good chance they won't happen. Sustainability is a very big issue. They're not just gonna give you money for you to do a project, next year it goes away. That's not the way it works. You've gotta have a plan, you've gotta have sustainability in there. How many years after the money's gone that they give you, are you gonna sustain this project? How many years are you gonna keep it going? And is it advantageous for them to spend the money if you're not gonna be able to keep it going? There's also a clawback measure in there. If you don't do what you put in that application that you're gonna do, then you're obligated to repay that money. So this is not a grant program, this is not a giveaway program. These are serious applications to be considered, and if you don't do what you say you're gonna do, you have to pay that money back. That goes county, school board, municipality, or whoever submits for this funding. So,
And there's some tension being developed on the Triumph Board for regarding how the legislature is going to look at Triumph. This thing that came out, Mr. Chairman. So the Triumph Board is very aware that everybody knows that there's $300 million in the Triumph Board, including the legislature. Now, what the Triumph Board doesn't want the legislature to do is to say to the counties, the 8 counties involved, well, you don't need that grant out of the legislature this year. You go to your Triumph and get money out of Triumph. And Triumph is saying, no, if you were applying to a grant program that the legislature's funding, you should be getting money out of the legislature. FERDAP is an example. And so we're going to be caught in this battle because the legislature's going to say, well, we wanted to control that money, but you all didn't let us, so you go to Triumph. And that's going to be a major battle. The other battle is, they already told us at the meeting, that if you have projects, let's say on a 5-year DOT work plan that you want to accelerate into the first year and you want to use Triumph money to do it, well, guess what? Triumph says no. If you've got funding from the state of Florida, then you have to use the state of Florida funding, and we're not going to let you use our money in lieu of the state of Florida money.
that's correct.
Right, and then another thing that bothers me is, you've got Escambia, Walton, let's say, Escambia, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton. You've got a lot of big-name companies out there that are located in those counties. I can say Wakulla and Franklin don't have that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They're looking at a lot of public-private partnerships that we don't have the accessibility to. And so, I don't know what to do about that.
And I talked about that.
If we had a big name company in here that really cared about the people of Franklin County, and we've got the airport out there, we've got the industrial park out there, we'd have somebody coming in here and saying, oh, you know what? We can really get some jobs in here, but you don't see nobody doing that. So what are we supposed to do? You know what I'm saying?
That's what we spoke about.
The public-private partnerships are the way to go for those counties, but it doesn't mean nothing to us.
If they got a limit on that money,
Yes, sir. Well, a limit to this extent. The legislature set aside for each county a minimum of 5% of the funds. So that Franklin County is entitled to $15 million at a minimum, subject to that we approve, that we meet the standards they set upon us. But $15 million is set aside for projects in Franklin County.
And it could be more, but the private match is also a component. Just as it is with the county restore dollars. If you don't have a match, you don't get a restore dollars the same way it is with Triumph. They want to turn this $300 million into $1.5 billion, along with the public match.
Which is all well and good.
Which will also let the legislator know that the Triumph board members are moving this thing in the right direction, because they're taking this amount of money and turning it into that amount of money as far as investment into economic development. So without that private match, then that's another thing that's going to now. Some of the smaller counties will be able to use some in-kind, we hope.
We hope.
But how much in-kind?
Are they gonna allow you to have?
Yeah, they're not gonna allow you to have $3 million worth of in-kind in order to get $5 million project.
That's right.
So it's quite complicated, but we can't give up. We gotta keep working on behalf of the people of the county and trying to ensure that we get our share of those dollars, and that's what we're trying to do. But having the ability to hire these consultants to come in and work on this 8 hours a day for us and take their direction from us, but then put together statistical data that you need to support these projects is something that we don't have the staff to do, and we're gonna need some help with that, so.
Well, what is, on the remaining meetings, who got to schedule it?
They email it when they schedule a meeting, it's not set up, in other words. When they have
Another
one
meeting
meeting,
September 13th, I might be able to go to, as it was off the chairman. Then there's one in October, I don't know where that is. The one in October actually might be over here, either Wakulla or Franklin County, because Susan Skelton, the executive director, wants to spread the meetings out. And so I've spoken to her a couple of times, she wants to have a meeting in Franklin or Wakulla. We'll make it a little easier on all of us to go to the meeting. But they're meeting once a month, Commissioner Lockley, until they get their system up and running, and then they probably will only meet quarterly when they have a bunch of grants to approve.
and one thing about these, real quick while we're on the subject, these bigger counties to the west of us, they've had projects ready for 3 years.
Right.
They've already got their projects done, they've already got the engineering done, but they have the resources to be able to do that. Our small county doesn't have the enough personnel to be able to be working on these projects. And really and truly, a lot of them over at the meeting I went to, they were ready for a check that day. Even though they hadn't even done the application process, they got all this stuff done, they're ready to roll, and they're all trying to jump the gun, and they're all wanting money. Which is why I spoke and tried to let them know that we're still here, we are part of the 8. We're part of the 8 during the oil spill, and we do have needs. We just are not able to react as quickly as some of these other counties with a lot more resources. So I want to get that across to them, that just because we don't have a project ready today, don't mean we won't have one ready, and not to give our money away to somebody else until we afford the opportunity to apply for these projects. So that was very critical on behalf of the board and on behalf of the people of the county.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead and vote on that motion, Noah.
To reimburse your travel.
You'll find.
We do have a motion and a second for that, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
All those in favor? All opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 2, inform the board that Mr. Cal Knickerbocker of DAX visited Franklin County last week and met with the chairman and I in response to the board's recent letter. It was an open-ended discussion where a lot of issues were raised and none were solved. DAX does have a large-scale barge shelling project starting in September and will end in December. They are planning on putting shell substrate on approximately 300 acres of oyster bottom. As the board is aware, the oyster industry continues to be harmed by lack of fresh water, and now oyster predators, which thrive in a salty environment, are decimating many of the oyster bars. And as you know, the winter bars already opened up September 1. I understand there was some not necessarily good news on some of those bars. So I don't know how we can solve the freshwater problem, but it's a problem out there. Item number 3, inform the board that the chairman signed the HMGP application for the acquisition of 6 acres of property on Alligator Point currently owned by Capital City Bank. In accordance with the board's previous directions, no county funds are going to the bank. The county has asked for an advance of funds from FEMA for the closing so that no county funds are even used in the interim. The tentative closing is set for this Friday, September 8th. The acquisition will resolve long-standing litigation between the county and Capital City. A hard copy of the HMG application has been put in the board file. I didn't scan it, but Lori might have because it was like 50 pages. A board action to ratify the application submission.
Pleasure of the board.
So I need to have board action to approve what the chairman signed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Sanders, second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? That motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt, Alan, the only real issue I have on my report is also associated with Capital City Bank and this potential settlement. The settlement agreement, as you saw from the email I sent out yesterday, is in process of being drafted by the parties. It's not yet in final form to present to you, and probably will not be in final form between now and the next meeting, but it's expected and hoped that if we are successful, the closing would occur before the next meeting. So I need board approval for the chairman to sign the settlement agreement, assuming we can hammer out all the details.
Pleasure of the board.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massey, second by Commissioner Sanders. Any further discussion?
That's on Capital City, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Not $1 of ad valorem tax money is
Yes.
going to anything to do with it.
It is
right?
in the proposed mediation agreement that no local ad valorem dollars will be used.
That's right. Okay.
All those in favor? All opposed? That motion carries.
Item number 4, inform the board that Pam Barnell have agreed on the request for qualification for engineering services for FEMA-funded recovery efforts. This RFQ was necessary in order to ensure compliance with new FEMA guidelines for reimbursement. Pam will run the ad in accordance with FEMA guidelines. The deadline for applying will be October 13th, and the board will open response at its October 17th meeting. It'll be our recommendation then to turn the responses over to a committee of Michael Marone, Mark Harrington, and myself for review and a recommendation to the board. It will be our intention to have a firm selected at the November 7th board meeting, and I should have had space here. So that's what we've done. We put the ad in the paper, or Pam is, she's running it in the Tallahassee Democrat because that meets the FEMA guidelines, and so hopefully we'll get you a good set of candidates to be engineering services in October. There should have been a space there because actually item number 5 is a separate item. So, item number 5, inform the board that FEMA has sent the PW for engineering services for the reconstruction of Alligator Drive to the county for signature. I spoke to Pam this morning. Pam will sign the PW on behalf of the county as EM director. FEMA is allocating $344,000 for engineering design for rebuilding the road in accordance with the design I have previously discussed a couple meetings ago. The design can get started once the county selects a firm based upon the RFQ mentioned above. I will tell you that Pam also had a PW, which I didn't realize she was going to get this early because it sort of contradicts what FEMA had said. She has a PW for $3.1 million to rebuild the road, and so she's going to sign that also. Now, I don't know whether FEMA will actually process that PW because they haven't even finished the environmental assessment, but maybe they are. If they are, then we're going to get started as soon as we get a permit.
Yeah, let's not push it.
Right.
Because, I mean, if they're gonna go ahead and go on through it,
Right.
it's about time.
Right. So we'll see. So she's going to sign that one also. So 6, inform the board that at some point in the next few board meetings, the board may notice in its bill payment some $31,000 going back to the state of Florida. This will be a repayment of funds that FEMA sent down for repairing a section of Gulf Shore Boulevard that we cannot repair. After Hurricane Hermine, I made a request that FEMA review the damage to Gulf Shore Boulevard just to keep intact the record of continuing damage on the road. I thought I'd adequately explain that the county cannot repair the road in its current location because of FDEP and the consent order, and that I was not seeking funds for repair, but I just want to document the damage. Apparently, you cannot document damage and then not receive funds to fix it. So the county will either have to return the funds or see if we can get the funds applied to other funds already obligated to relocate Gulf Shore Boulevard. So I just want to, we're going to try and get the money moved to another, to the other part of the Gulf Shore, but I don't know if we can or not. We'll work that battle out. Number 7, inform the board that while the environmental assessment for Gulf Shore Boulevard is complete, the scope of work to allow us to relocate the road is still going through the FEMA system. Attached to my report is a copy of the request from the state to FEMA to allow for the previously obligated funds of some $400,000 to be used to finish the Gulf Shore Boulevard relocation. So, you know, it's not one thing, it's something else with FEMA, but hopefully we'll get this resolved and get that project finished after years. Inform the board that the environmental assessment, or the EA for repairs to Alligator Drive, is continuing to move forward. I have reviewed the draft FONSI, which stands for Finding of No Significant Impact. The draft continues to recommend the design preferred by the county, which is repair the road in place with sheet pile on the water side and a concrete cap on either side of the paved road. The project does not include any beach nourishment. Please find attached the FEMA scoping letter that was sent out to all interested parties, so the public already has that letter. And then lastly, item 9, provide the board with a copy of Resort Village status report. This is a report required by the state with a copy sent to the county. As the board is aware, Resort Village has reduced the number of lots through consolidation and has sold a number of lots to the Plantation Owners Association for open space. There is no action needed by the board. And that's my report, unless there's any questions.
Any questions from the board from Mr. Allen, please? Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Next would be Mr. Michael Malone, County Coordinator Report.
Item number 1, Commissioners. At your last meeting, the board opened requests for qualifications for construction, engineering, and inspection services for the Mill Road paving project. The review committee ranked the firms in the following order. 1, Alday Howell Engineering, Southeastern Consulting Engineering. 2, Panhandle Engineering. 3, Anchor CEI. Board action to start negotiations with Alday Howell Engineering, Southeastern Consulting Engineering for CEI services for the Mill Road project.
Pleasure of the board.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Sanders, second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries.
Item number 2, Commissioners, board action to authorize advertising for seal bids for approximately 1.67 miles of widening and resurfacing, and then 3.10 miles of new construction, striping, signs, minor drainage improvements, and grassing along Mill Road, beginning at the intersection of State Road 30 and continuing towards Burnt Bridge Road. Seal bills will be due by 4:30 on Monday, October 16th, and will be opened and read aloud at your Tuesday, October 17th regular meeting.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massey. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
We addressed item 3 earlier. Item 4, at your August 15th meeting, I informed the board that Mr. Gordon Hunter expressed interest in serving on the Airport Advisory Committee. At that time, the chairman directed Mr. Jason Puckett, your airport manager, to present a list of the current members serving on the committee and their attendance record, which is included in your agenda packet, before considering adding any new members. After reviewing the list and having discussions with Mr. Puckett, there is a need for the board to consider reorganizing the AAC. Based on information received, I recommend changing the makeup of the AAC to allow each commissioner one appointment, which would create a 5-member committee. These appointments could be from current or new members, and preferably are county residents. In addition, we could add the role of AAC administrator to the airport manager's duties, which would have him creating the agendas, keeping the minutes, and presenting AAC recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners for discussion and/or approval. Commissioner?
Hang on just a second, he's still presenting information to the board. Well, you think he's done it, I don't think he is, sir. Proceed, Mike.
Yes, sir. Okay, so based on your instructions, Jason and I talked. Even Ted had a very extensive spreadsheet of years of attendance and so forth. Hey, Commissioner, Alan was more hands-on with the airport than I was, so I'm away from it. But it's meetings, they're not on a regular basis. I think they need to decide when they're gonna have meetings. Let's put it on the calendar, like every other advisory board that you have. They also,
So you say monthly meeting? Or semi-monthly, whatever it is?
as long as it's regular, so there's no advertising issues.
They know when the meetings are.
The public knows, and they know what it
Okay.
is. On your AAC, you had a couple of members that don't live in the county. I've never known this board to have a makeup of any advisory board with people not living in the county. If that's happened before, that's without my knowledge. The current makeup also didn't seem like it was you had people from, each part of the county representing the makeup of the airport board. So, I mean, I can sit here and list a bunch of things, Commissioner. I just think it's a good idea for this board, just like your planning and zoning board, just like your board of adjustments. You guys create a 5-member board. I mean, you have the list of who's currently serving, unless you have someone new. Appoint members. Present it to me at the next meeting. Let's get one motion to create a new board. By new board, I don't mean all new members, I just mean a new board. And let Jason take a bigger role, because that board has no administrative help. So whereas P&Z and Board of Adjustment, they have staff, let Jason be the administrative help. Make him responsible for, make sure those agendas are ready, him and the chairman sit down and talking. Make him responsible for keeping the minutes, Make him be the one to come in front of this board and say, okay, the AAC met, this is what they want to do, this is what they're recommending, this is how I think we can do it. You see, I just don't like the structure of the board, Commissioners. And that's what I'm asking you guys to consider. I'm not asking you to appoint members today. Just send them to me and I'll have a list of members at the next meeting. I say, okay, based on your emails or your suggestions, this is what you guys want to make up the AAC. And we move forward from there. It just needs to be more organized, Commissioners. That's how I feel about it.
Well, now, the old airport manager told me a major issue was you got 11 or 12 people on the board, 6 of them don't show up. So then you can't do nothing because you don't have a quorum.
Right.
Because you got such a big board. If 6 people don't show up, you can't move forward, you can't do anything because you don't have a quorum at the meeting.
And I don't think a big board is needed, Commissioner. I don't. I mean, unless Alan knows something I don't know.
The board got too big.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if y'all remember back, we haven't had a representative from the district over there around the eastern part of the county in a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
And I had a problem with it. I've had a problem with it because the person that you did have on it represented 2 districts, District 5 and District 2. But yet he lived at that time in District 5. So, I mean, I'm in agreement with this, and I'm also in agreement to the preferably a county resident. Because when you're a county resident, you have the county interest more at heart.
Yeah.
And you're more hands-on than what you are if you live somewhere else and trying to be in there. So, anyway, I think we need to proceed on Michael's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a gentleman who wants to speak. Please come forward and state your name for the record.
I'm a real nice guy, Mo, once you get to know me. But
Well,
Steve
we got certain
Kirschenbaum.
protocols and procedures we follow, and you need to learn the protocols and procedures.
I didn't know that. And what I was going to say is, as a member of the advisory commission, I just heard about this today, so I ran down here. Michael Rome's suggestion, though appreciated, was done with no advisory input. And there has been a problem. There's only 6 members on the commission, not 12. Historically, there's been 9 people on the commission. One of the members, Mr. Stevens, who ran for school board, Frank Stevens, who is an educator in aviation, who could be an integral part of this commission. Jason Puckett didn't have his proper contact information and has not been getting hold of him for these meetings. I missed one meeting, but the problem, what we need is we need a monthly meeting. The monthly meeting should also have a commissioner, a rotating commissioner, come down to that meeting so all the commissioners are in the loop with what's going on with the economic development at the airport. And Ms. Sanders, that was incredible what you said. That's what we need, an industrial park up here to bring in jobs and stuff, and I totally support that. It would be nice if we could have a monthly meeting that's slated, just like Michael said, and that if a member of the committee or the airport manager comes back to the commission monthly and reports on our progress. Mr. Puckett is a good guy. I like him. I think he knows his business, but he's from Georgia. He's from out of town. He's a good guy. If he could make it every time to these meetings, it would be great, but if not, there should be a representative. If he wants to take over the duties, as Michael said, of running the commission, I think that's a great idea, but not being a resident of the town, the county, he shouldn't be a voting member of the commission. It has not been being run right. There was nobody taking minutes at these meetings. People weren't being notified properly, but we need the strongest and best people in this community to be on this commission. Gordon Hunter, who was being proposed a couple of weeks ago, was a A4 pilot in Vietnam, decorated pilot. He was an airline pilot for Delta Airlines for years, and he's somebody who's got the energy and the blood and wants to get involved. Myself, I want to see economic development at the site, but I would love to see the monthly meeting. I'm in support of Jason running the meeting and being the airport manager, but I would like to see a commissioner once a month, a different commissioner come down to the meeting and see what goes on, and a monthly report from somebody from the commission to the town, because this is probably one of the most important economic development projects in this town, and I really feel if the town embraces it, it could be great for the town, not hurt anybody's quality of life, and bring good jobs to Franklin County. So, and also Ted Mussler, who's on the committee right now, was former airport manager, and I'd hate to lose him. There's a lot of good people on this committee, but this should have been discussed. What's being presented to you right now should have been discussed with the commission. But I think it would be nice if we had somebody taking the minutes and running the meetings, and I think Jason would be the right guy to do that. And eventually, I would love to see somebody, the norm in aviation is the airport manager is based at the airport, and he is the eyes of the county to make sure the FBO is doing his job properly, that county equipment is in hangars, that aircraft are in hangars, that the runways are being maintained, to oversee the operation of the airport. We have a different arrangement here, how we're doing it, but it seems to be working, but a little bit dysfunctional. But thank you very much, and I hope I can remain on the committee. And Mr. Parrish, I apologize if I was being out of order. I've never sat in, this is my first day sitting in on your meetings, but I didn't know, I was afraid you were going to vote on the resolution before I had a chance to give any input.